is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
I want you to do it 3 times. You're going to rotate, tip it out of bounds, rotate, tip it out of bounds, rotate, tip it out of bounds. And the whole team would be right there and they'd be clapping. The whole program would be right there. And everyone would understand that that was one thing that we needed out of that guy. And he did it in a way that both built them up, but made them understand what we needed to do to win. And I thought that was elite.
Tim McAllister is entering his first season as an assistant coach at Western Kentucky University in the 2023-24 season. He will be entering his 5th collegiate basketball season as an assistant coach. McAllister has appeared in 5 NCAA tournaments during his tenure, worked with 4 All-Americans, and has worked with multiple players drafted into the NBA. The Corcoran, California native helped lead Texas Tech to the 2019 NCAA National Championship final and to the Big 12 Conference Regular Season Championship in his first season as the program's chief of staff. McAllister was named to the NABC's 2019 Under Armour 30 Under 30 team, a group selected as 30 of the most outstanding men's college basketball coaches under the age of 30. Tim previously spent time as an assistant coach at Georgia Southern, Creighton, and Emory, and was also a student assistant at Murray State. Hey Hoopheads, check out these great deals this July from our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Get $4,000 off any machine in their professional lineup or $1,000 off the Dr. Dish home machine. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoopheads podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Those are some great deals, Hoopheads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Mijailo Raducanu from Gannon Baker Basketball, and you're listening to the Hoopheads podcast.
Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the #1 play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its Playbank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Get ready to take some notes as you listen to this episode with Tim McAllister, men's basketball assistant coach at Western Kentucky University. Hello and welcome to the Hoopheads podcast. It's Mike Klinzing here, without right now, but maybe with at some point, my co-host Jason Sunkel. But I am pleased to be joined by men's basketball assistant coach at Western Kentucky University, Tim McAllister. Tim, welcome to the Hoopheads pod.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate you guys having me on. Not sure how this is going to go, but let's enjoy the ride.
It's going to go well. I can guarantee it. We're going to have some fun. Hopefully we'll be entertaining along the way and be able to pull out some stuff that will be beneficial for all those coaches out there in our audience who are listening. So let's start, Tim, by going back in time to when you were a kid. Tell me about some of your experiences with the game of basketball when you were growing up.
Yeah, no, basketball has always been a big part of my life. My father's currently a Division III head coach at Latorno University in Texas. But at the time, he was an assistant high school coach when I was growing up, and then he was a head high school coach on the girls' side. And so I've always been around the game. I've always really liked the game. I really, and this is going to sound unusual, I didn't even know I loved the game until I got older. And that was even out of college. And once I got into the military and honor deployment, where I realized I didn't have it. I had no access to the game of basketball, and I was looking around, and everybody around me didn't seem to be missing it as much as I was. And it became a really weird phenomenon for me, and something that I really, really missed. But yeah, I grew up around the game, really enjoyed the game, and just got a chance to sit in a lot of really good gyms. My father was he went to the Final Four in the state of California in the CIF, and which is really, really hard to do down in the Pyramid at LA. And I got to kind of sit, and just watch practices. I got to watch the freshman of the year that went to Arizona. I got to sit there and just be around some really, really good basketball minds and just some fun times growing up.
So was coaching then not on your radar, or was it on your radar? Because a lot of times when you have somebody whose parent was a coach, those kids kind of grow up and they're like, someday, even if it's not necessarily front of mind, I think it's kind of a lot of times back of mind that, yeah, I'm a player. Yeah, I like the game. And at some point I kind of want to emulate what my parent did. So kind of where were you from that standpoint?
Sure. I was the opposite. I was going to be an FBI or an ATF agent, all the way up into, going into college. I went in as a criminal justice major. I joined the Air Force in order to really further my resume, in order to get into one of those agencies, one of the alphabet agencies, in order to really get into that law enforcement career. And I had no intentions of coaching, none whatsoever. The only thing I had done was I assisted my dad as a varsity assistant for about 2 months before I went to basic training. And that was with a bad girls basketball team. No offense to the Logan County Cougars that year, but they weren't very good. And that was my only experience. I had no intentions of coaching and really didn't want to, and didn't figure out I liked it until a deployment to Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. So
you're there. What triggers it besides the fact that you just were away from the game? What parts of it did you miss?
Yeah, I missed the ability to just turn on a college basketball game at any point, or to just be around people who wanted to talk about the game. And it was weird and new for me because I had literally never been without the game. It had been with me, through summers, being around my dad, being around, just the game in general. And it was really an unusual and unnerving feeling for me. We had a gym there on the base, and it started to just, as basketball season and winter came around, it was a really empty feeling for me. So when I got an email on base about them needing a basketball coach, it really kind of piqued my interest because I just wanted to be back around the game.
What did that look like when you were coaching the team on the base?
Yeah, it was an unusual deal because they needed a basketball coach, and then after volunteering for it, I found out there was no team. So that was an impediment to their plan.
So you became a recruiter right away.
I did, and I didn't intend to be the head coach either. And they said, "All right, you're the head coach," and I said, "Okay, that's great." Mind you, I'm also a really low level airman at the time, so that comes into account here in a second. But when you have to field the team, you put out for tryouts on a base, you're going to get all ranks. Well, if you're one of the lowest 3 ranks in the military, that means you're cutting people from those teams that are of higher rank than you and that you might need something from on the base. So that was a really awkward situation.
Were you posting a list, or did you have to have conversations?
Oh, it was both. It was both. And I had to figure out if I wanted, my food spit in, or if I didn't want any IT service, or if I wanted to piss off, the guy that worked the gate that I went through every day. Right. So
wow.
That was not ideal. Not an ideal way to start off my coaching career. Instead of pissed off parents, I had pissed off lieutenants.
Pissed off colleagues, I understand.
Yeah.
So what's the level of play like, and who are you guys playing against?
Yeah, that's a good question, because for the first 4 weeks, we didn't know either. We were practicing over there, and I got kind of lucky. I had a backup point guard from Purdue who blew out his knee and joined the Air Force. I had a walk-on from Mississippi State. I had a former JUCO big that was there as a contractor. And then I had a Division III WIAC shooter who was all Wisconsin. I think it's and I apologize if it's WIAC or if it's WIAC. I don't know. But he was an all-conference performer in Division III. So I had a decent level of play on my team, but I had no idea what we were going to play against. And then one day they just came to me on a Monday and said, hey, Senior Airman McAllister, you need to get a suit if you don't have one. And I was like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I packed my suit on a deployment. So we had to go get me a suit. I said, I apologize, sir, but can you tell me why I need a suit? They said, well, on Friday, you're gonna play the Collegiate All-Stars of Kyrgyzstan in front of the U.S. Ambassador, the Prime Minister of Sport, and the Colonel of this base. I said, yes, sir. And then I went back and I said, I have no idea what I got myself into. This is not what I thought I was signing up for.
That was the days before pullovers and khakis, right?
Yes. And I still don't think those would have flied.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. That's funny. So what was that first game like?
It was bizarre. It was bizarre, to be honest with you. There was like a parade beforehand. There was like dancing, and there was this big ceremony, and it was a big friendship game, a win the hearts and minds type of deal. And there were about 2,000 Kyrgyz people there on hand to watch it. And I didn't know FIBA rules. It was just a bizarre setting. The officials would hold the basketball after the Kyrgyz team scored, which is not FIBA rules. It's just cheating. But, it was a really weird setting, but it was awesome because, about halfway through the first quarter, maybe the second quarter, I gathered the guys up and I said, hey, listen, basically, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what they're doing either, but let's go kick their ass because I'm tired of this. And the guys responded. It wasn't a win-win for the Gipper speech by any stretch of the imagination, but when those guys responded and went on a 12-0 run or something, and we capped it with a dunk and went up by 8 or 10 at halftime, I knew I'd caught the bug at that point. I knew that this is what I wanted to do, and I was pretty fired up going forward.
What did you love about it? What was it that grabbed you?
It was being able to help affect people to go to a higher level, because we weren't playing very well, and those guys, there was more there. And just the ability to positively impact someone to make them perform better or be better. And I think to an extent, that's what we're trying to do with all of these young men now in college basketball, is we're trying to get them to be better than what they are in the moment. And I think it grabbed me in that moment. And I think it's the reason why I'm still doing this.
So how did that then shift what you thought you wanted to do for your career? Because obviously you joined the Air Force, which is no small step towards what you wanted to do. And now all of a sudden coaching grabs you and you have to figure out, okay, what are the steps? If that's what I want to do, how do I do that? So what was the plan? How'd you go ahead and change the process of what you thought you were going to be doing?
Yeah, I completely just pivoted. I changed my major, not to anything coaching related, just to Spanish, because I thought, errantly in my mind at least, that I could go recruit Spanish-speaking players at some point.
All right.
I thought it was one thing that could help me. And then I immediately tried to figure out how, when I got back, I could get involved, how I could get into coaching and what the best way was to get into coaching. I had seen how my father had been a better or a worse coach, depending on how good his players were. So I knew I didn't want to do high school at that point, because it's a lot harder to choose your players and it's a lot more illegal, from what I understand.
In some places.
Yeah, for most places. So I got hooked up with some really, really good people, and I think it really when I think about the biggest key for my career is relationships, and that's when those relationships really started. I got hooked up with working for Billy Kennedy, who was the head coach at Murray State at the time. And his assistants were Steve Prohm, who's currently the head coach at Murray State, Amir Abdur-Rahim, who's currently the head coach at South Florida. And the other assistant at the time was Isaac Chu. And Chu is now an assistant at New Mexico. And then the following year, the assistants, Steve Prohm was the head coach. Matt McMahon, who's the head coach at LSU now, was an assistant. James Kane, who's an assistant at Dayton, was an assistant. And then William Small, who's an assistant at South Florida. And I tell people all the time, the relationships and the situations that you put yourself in and the people that you connect yourself with is always going to be one of the biggest parts of this game, whether it's in recruiting, whether it's in coaching and trying to move up the ladder. Those relationships are so, so important. And I got hooked up with the right people, and very much by chance and by God's grace, I got put into a really, really good situation.
How'd that happen? I mean, how do you get that opportunity?
I told them I would do anything they wanted me to do, and I'd do it for free.
There you go.
So I had to finish my degree at Murray State. And so I wanted to go ahead and do that. So I became a student assistant for them. And they allowed me to do a lot more than I probably should have been allowed to do, which I'm very grateful for. Doing individual workouts, learning video, learning pieces of analytics, and just how this business works. All those guys I consider mentors to this day that still help me on a day-to-day or week-to-week, month-to-month basis. So I'm very grateful for that because they taught me a lot about what this business is and what it should be.
So after you get done there at Murray State and you graduate, then you go to Emory. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So
how does that happen? I mean, we've had Zim on twice. Great guy. I just think the world of him as a coach and as a person. And I've met him a couple different times in person. Actually saw Emory play up here in Cleveland a couple years ago when they played against Case Western Reserve, and met Jason down at the Billis camp, I think in 2019. I think I was down there where we hooked up in person. So obviously a great guy. So how does that come to be? Yeah,
I'd echo exactly what you just said. I think he's one of the best coaches in the country that a lot of people don't know about. He should have already, and I don't want to get on the stump here, but he should have already been a Division I head coach if he wanted to be. The fact that nobody scooped him up is crazy. But now that I'm off my stump, I again, kind of going back to those relationships, at the Final Four, I tried to meet as many people as I possibly could. And I met a guy who was a student assistant at the time at Georgia, I believe, or VCU, one of the two. And he said, I'm looking for jobs kind of as the season ends, and Coach Prohm is trying to help me. Coach Kennedy's trying to help me with different ones. And I'm interviewing for grad assistant spots. And he texts me and says, hey, I don't know if you'd be interested. This is just a guy I met at the Final Four that I kept in touch with. And he says, I don't know if you'd be interested, but, Emory University has an opening for an assistant coach. Now, I don't think it's going to pay a whole lot because it's the second assistant at a Division III school, but you might want to check it out because he's a really good ball coach. And from there, got on the phone with Coach Zimmerman. And the piece that always sticks with me is two parts of this. One is he asked me to come work camp, which I didn't see as a slight. And a lot of young guys, for some reason, think that's a slight. But I came and I worked his camp. And the first thing that I thought was really, really a turning point for me was I was working camp and I'm reffing a game while I'm coaching a team in the division that I'm running. And his son is in the camp, Coach Zimmerman's son. And his son at that point, and I don't mean to call Trevor out, he's a pitcher now at center, but Trevor could only go right. And I mean only go right. And one of the kids on the other team figured out that Trevor could only go right. And so he sat on his right hand and he picked him like 2 times in a row. And he went and shot layups. And so Trevor got it out of the net after the second time, and he turned and he whirled that ball at that kid's head. And I had a decision to make right there and then. And I was thinking to myself, I'm either going to get hired right now or I'm about to not have any chance at this job. And I threw him out and I sent him to his mom, who was working at the snack bar and running the snack bar. And I thought, this could be over for me right here, right now. Thankfully, it wasn't over at that point. And so that would be the first point that really sticks out to me. The second thing is Steve Prohm got on the phone with Jason Zimmerman 3 days before Coach Prohm's wedding. And he would not get off the phone with him until he agreed to hire me. which I still appreciate very much to this day. And then I got there and I had to figure a lot of things out. Coach Zimmerman taught me how to be an assistant coach. He taught me how to really dig into a scout, how to, do player development, how to run a portion of practice. And he didn't treat me, as though I didn't know anything, but he treated me like I needed to be taught. And again, very appreciative of that because it really helped my growth. He encouraged me to recruit. He encouraged me to be on the floor. He encouraged me to be in all facets. The only thing I will say is that the fact that he had me monitoring any of those guys academically was a joke.
You weren't serving as a tutor. You weren't very much value as a tutor.
Oh, I saw a couple of these guys' papers at one point or another, and I just said, I have no idea what that says, guys. I just hope it's good. I hope you get a great grade. Good luck to you. So
that's the same thing I think of as a parent too. You go through, and I got my kids are in high school, and I took calculus in high school and college, but it's been 35 years since I took it. And so you look at it and you're like, I'm not going to be able to help you much with that. You're pretty much on your own. Good luck. I'd have to go back and spend hours and hours relearning it to even remotely try to teach any of it to you. So good luck. And I can only imagine that the students at Emory, for sure, you were in that same boat. I would guess 99.9% of our population would have been right there with you.
No doubt about it.
All right. So after that experience with Zim and being at Emory, and obviously getting an opportunity to have your hands in all different parts of the program, which I think it's interesting when you talk to different guys who have kind of gone through different routes. One of the things that I hear universally with people who start out at the Division III level, similar to what you did, is just one of the things that they feel most grateful for is that they did sort of dip their toe in the water of almost every aspect of the program, as opposed to, let's say you start at the Division I level and you're an ops and that's your first experience. You kind of are pigeonholed and you're only sort of doing those jobs. You don't necessarily get to see or feel or touch all those other parts. So I'm guessing for you that you really appreciated the opportunity to just have all those things in your background now that you've had that experience, and then that leads you to your next opportunity.
100%. No, and obviously it culminated really well with an Elite Eight appearance and beating the number one team in the country at their place in Sweet 16. But I have very, very fond memories of that place because of those opportunities to do everything. And when I got to be a video guy at Creighton and when I got to do chief of staff thing at Texas Tech, it wasn't as though I had no frame of reference. I could lean back on experiences that I had at Emory to have a more well-rounded kind of, outlook on things. So 100%.
All right. So talk about that opportunity at Creighton, how that comes to you.
Yeah. So it kind of a weird interlude in it that's really not in my resume is my wife, or my fiance at the time. I got engaged while I was in Atlanta at Emory, and she was an assistant rifle coach at Kentucky. So she is talking with one of the assistant video guys who's now the head women's coach at Pikeville, Cliff Williams. And he tells her, hey, we're going to have an opening. I don't know if your fiance would be interested or not. So I went up and I interviewed, actually got offered the job. It later got rescinded. Kind of a weird situation, but I was in Lexington for a couple months, and my wife, or soon to be wife, gets offered the Nebraska rifle job as the head coach. And so she's looking at me and she's like, well, you're in the process of getting on here. And I said, hey, you got a chance to be a head coach in the Big Ten at 23. Let's go. Let's roll. So I got there and I was, I had talked with Coach Wellman at Nebraska Wesleyan.
Yep.
I had talked to Concordia on the women's side. And I was kind of in the process of picking what it was that I wanted to do to try and stay in the game when Coach Prohm calls again. And he says, hey, I don't know what you're looking to do, but you might want to wait. I think a spot may open up at Creighton. And so I had to make a decision on whether or not I was going to take a $35,000 job or I was going to wait for a potential job that wasn't going to pay anything. And to be honest with you, if I didn't have a relationship with Coach Prohm where he had really tried to take care of me before, I probably would have taken the $35,000.
Yep.
But I trusted him because of the experiences that we had and the experience that he had with helping me get on at Emory. And he got me hooked up with Steve Lutz at Creighton, which obviously will pay dividends later for me here at Western Kentucky. But I got a very interesting call from Coach Lutz. It basically just said, hey, Coach Prohm says you're really good. Just don't screw this up, okay? I was kind of like, okay, all right. And he said he wants to know if you can do analytics. Coach McDermott wants to know if you can do analytics. And I had a very small Microsoft Excel spreadsheet that I tried to do everything in my power to make look better than it really was. And I went in there and I interviewed, and he said, hey, this is a volunteer spot, but it's a real position on our staff. It helps with analytics and video. And Drew Adams, who was at University U Chicago and then went to, I believe he went to American as the Dobo, was in that spot prior. So, hey, we've got a track record of success. You can step into this role. So I took the role, was very excited. I was there for a year as the volunteer and then 3 years as a paid video coordinator. And again, I don't mean to keep harping and killing a dead horse, but the relationships are so important. That staff was Greg McDermott was the head coach, obviously still the head coach at Creighton. Steve Lutz was an assistant there. He's the head coach at Western Kentucky, my current boss. This is just the first staff. Darian DeVries was an assistant there, and he's the head coach at Drake now. And Patrick Sellers was an assistant that first year. He's the head coach at Central Connecticut State. So, again, the experience that I've had has largely been based around having really, really good coaches mentor me and tell me that I'm not doing something right. And then Steve Murfeld, who's there still, was the head coach at Evansville and Hampton. And so just the high level of basketball minds that are sitting there and are basically every day I'm getting to learn from was an elite level experience. I call it getting my master's in basketball because that place is just such a high level X's and O's think tank almost that you better be on your game and you better know what you're talking about.
So when you're in that job, how much time are you spending by yourself going through film versus sitting with a member or multiple members of the staff?
That's a good question. I would break down for each opponent that we played. I would break down the last 500 offensive possessions, not including baseline and sideline out of bounds. And they would then all be categorized into families and then into individual sets. So that generally, at the beginning, that took me a really long time. Once I had been in the Big East and once I had seen a lot of these teams multiple times and my pattern recognition just got a lot better, it got a lot easier. And then I spent more of my time because then we would draw every single set that we saw. But then I would spend more time actually trying to figure out with the assistants. We would sit with the assistant that had the scout, and then we would sit as a team and watch a long edit. And then I would pare it down again and watch a shorter edit, even though it'd probably still be 30 or 40 clips with the team. So it was, I wouldn't say that I spent an inordinate amount of time by myself, but it got less and less as I got better at that job through the 4 years that I was there.
What aspect of, whether it was offense or defense, do you feel like you became more confident about as you go through? Because obviously if you're watching that much film, you're seeing just about everything that teams are going to be throwing out there, and you're learning as you go. And as you said, you're starting to recognize patterns and actions and things that you can pick out way more easily as you go through it. But when you think about all that time you spend in the video room, what are some things that you left there feeling confident of, like, hey, I have a much better understanding of this or that than kind of when you went in? And I'm sure there was a lot of things, but maybe you can pick out one or two highlights.
Yeah, I think, and this partially goes to what I think Coach McDermott is really, really good at. One of the things he's really, really good at. But the ability to exploit any defensive coverage on and off the basketball. So as you're watching it, and like we were talking about, the patterns emerge, but why would you use each individual pattern and when are they popping up is so much more important. Because I do think that the biggest thing I learned was, and there were some elite level coaches in the Big East, so it was fun to watch the adjustments, but the counters to the counters of why you would do something. And Coach McDermott could just do that in his mind and then call out a set. And sometimes our players wouldn't even know why we were calling the set.
Right.
But it would work because he recognized, okay, their hard hedge is getting too far extended. We're going to go thumb side. We're going to hit the quick pass off of that, one bounce and advance the basketball. And then we're looking at these two options, whether it's the skip or the roll. And I think that ability to quickly recognize patterns within games and adjustments within games, and then counter that to be able to get you a basket or two or three in the second half of games, I think is a big separator. And then I think that I recognized with all of that the two most paramount things, and I know this is talked about and it's a very obvious thing, but it emerges even more when you watch film, that the pace at which you run things and the space with which you have in your offense are paramount. Like sometimes we would screw things up, but we'd be going so fast that it would yield, we would have success. Or we would, a marginal offensive player would catch the ball, but there was such good spacing that he would be able to get to the rim. And I think those things are very, very obvious once you watch more and more and more, because those things are they're staples. And I don't think that's ever going to change, is that those things are so important.
Yeah, it's interesting when you start to really look at and break down and watching that much film that you start to see, okay, these are things that work, and you start to recognize what it works against and all those pieces. Did you miss being able to do some of that, then see it go from the video room and see it go from an idea to being able to actually teach it on the floor because you're not coaching players out on the court? How much did you miss that part of it?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to move up in the profession is because I wanted to be able to implement those ideas. And I wanted to be able to teach them and find the best ways to teach them. Because I think, like I said at the beginning, I think that's one of the most rewarding parts of this job is to see, people elevate their performance. And so that was certainly a big reason why, after 4 years, I really wanted to continue to grow and get closer to getting on the floor.
And that leads you to Texas Tech. So tell us about the transition from Creighton to Texas Tech.
Yeah, it was kind of a whirlwind. Again, the relationship piece is so paramount. Steve Lutz had went to Purdue my last year at Creighton, and I was helping run camp at Creighton, and it was in July. And I kind of thought, hey, the cycle's pretty much over for me. I'm going to be at Creighton another year, and I'm helping run camp, and I get a call from Coach Lutz, and he says, hey, would you want to, be the chief of staff at Texas Tech? So, well, they just came off an Elite Eight. Of course, I would want to talk to him. Like, I don't know what the job entails, but yeah, I'd really like to take a look at that. Right?
Yeah.
It'd be okay.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes later, I get a call from Steve Prohm that says, hey, are you involved at Texas Tech? And I said, I think as of 10 minutes ago, I might be, if you're calling me. And so it went really, really fast, and then it went really slow because Coach Beard had ACL surgery. And so it was kind of a wacky deal. I didn't know whether or not I was getting the job. I wasn't sure. and a lot of people could probably tell you this, but Coach Beard works deep into the night. And so I think partially because it's when he's available and partially because he wanted to test me, but we probably talked 6 times between 1 and 2 in the morning.
He's on my schedule.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to call him up and say, hey, we can do a podcast at 1 a.m. if you want, Coach. I'm available.
I think that would be the best time to get him if you can get him.
There we go.
Yeah. So I take the job in August, and it's kind of a whirlwind getting down there, and everything that was kind of on my plate was just a little bit of everything, and figuring out exactly what it was that I was going to be doing on a day-to-day basis took a little bit of time, but it was a very different way of doing things, and I'm grateful that I did it because I've seen such different ways of winning. Because obviously, at Creighton, those guys are winning. At Texas Tech with Beard, and then at Texas, and now at Ole Miss, I have no doubt they're going to have success. Just a very different way of doing things, but having success. And then Murray State and Emory, all those places have had success, just doing it a little bit differently. I think, a lot of people ask, the obvious questions about, what is Coach Beard like, and why is the program really good? And what I would tell you is that from day one, Coach Beard's messaging to the players never wavered. He had a consistent message for the players every single day. And it was incredible to watch him motivate each guy differently, but treating them equally. And it's still one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. Just his ability to get guys to do what's best for the team and making them understand that it's also what's best for them. And obviously the success was, again, incredible that year. Go on a 9-game win streak to win the Big 12, go on a magical run to get to the national championship game, and then fall short against Virginia. But it was just such a different way of doing things, like I said.
What stands out as the main differences?
I think the biggest thing for Texas Tech was the individual player aspect of everything that we did. That's everything from video, like your video. Every single day, those guys would have individual clips offensively and defensively to watch. It didn't matter if it was a workout, if it was practice, or if it was, the game to go to the Sweet 16. You every single day you have individual offensive and defensive clips. In the weight room, John Riley, who I think is one of the best strength coaches in the country, individualizes each guy's stuff. And they may come in one by one. He may have 13, 14 different sessions every day, but everything was individualized. What those guys wanted to eat was individual to them, whether or not they needed to be a weight gainer or they were a guy that needed to lean up. All those things were very much to a man. And there were so many people that were all working to make sure that each player had success when we got together as a team, and that included player development workouts, those guys each had their own plans, and the way that they did, the way that we went about actually implementing that with those guys, I think was elite. It was just very different. A lot of the stuff at Creighton was very team oriented. Here's what we're going to do as a team today. We're going to watch film as a team today. And it's not that didn't occur at Texas Tech. It's just that it was in a different light, and everything all day centered around those guys getting better. And so and just kind of the way of going about it. I wouldn't say that we tricked people at Texas Tech offensively. I think that there was an element of this is what we do. And we didn't make a whole bunch of adjustments all the time. That's not saying that we didn't. And Coach Beard's a high-level X's and O's coach as well. But I think there's an element of this is what we do really well. I'd like to see you stop it. Or this is what we do defensively, and let's see if you can go through us consistently and win games. And it was just a different mindset. But it was a lot of fun to watch, and it was a lot of fun to be a part of. And there was a camaraderie amongst, both staffs that I think is elite. That just made it a lot of fun as well.
How do you take that individual focus where if I'm a player and I know that everybody is bought into my success as an individual, then clearly if you make your individual players better, your team is going to be better. But ultimately, you still have to bring those guys back together to sacrifice some things in order to make your team be successful. So how did Coach Beard go about taking that transition from, hey, we're pouring everything we can, all our resources, into making you the best individual player that you can be, and now we want you, that individual player, to plug into this bigger system of our team to help us have team success. So how did that part of it work? And it may not be, again, a simple answer, but just kind of give us an idea of how you went from that individual focus to the team focus.
Yeah, I think a couple things, but the biggest one and the most important one that he always emphasized to all of us was the relationship piece. He wanted us to be basically the closest team in the country. So he would have individual, relationships with each guy, but also we would have our relationship with those guys as well. Hey, who have you taken out to lunch this week? Who have you been to breakfast with? What's going on in their life at home? So that way, when we got them to the practice floor, those guys, number one, knew that we cared about them at a really, really high level through our actions with all of the individual stuff to make themselves better, but also the off the court stuff and making sure that those guys knew that we really cared about them. So that when we got to the court and coach said, hey, I need you to make sure that you, like, if you catch that ball in the corner and you're open, I have to have you shoot it. Like, we have to have you shoot it. Like, and I remember specific examples of him calling guys out to play a role that we needed them to play. But he was really, like Monty Williams says, he was really calling them up. And he would do it in such a way that I think is elite, and it's hard to replicate. But he would stop practice and he would say, Matt Mooney, we have to have you get a deflection there. We have to have you get a deflection. For our team to be really good, you have to get a deflection here on this pass because you have rotated to the right spot and you've done all these right things, and now we need you to make that finishing play right there. So I want you to do it 3 times. You're going to rotate, tip it out of bounds, rotate, tip it out of bounds, rotate, tip it out of bounds. And the whole team would be right there and they'd be clapping. The whole program would be right there. And everyone would understand that that was one thing that we needed out of that guy. And he did it in a way that both built them up, but made them understand what we needed to do to win. And I thought that was elite.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, again, what you want to do, right, is make sure that your players, A, understand what you want from them, which is a big part of it. B, understand that what you want from them, how that helps to impact team success. And then if you can get everybody buying into saying, hey, this is your role, this is what we need you to do, coaching staff, players, which just sounds like that's exactly what was going on. That to me for sure sounds like a winning formula without question.
No doubt. No doubt.
Hey, Hoopheads Nation, whether you're a beginner basketball player looking for a place to start or a seasoned vet looking to level up your skills, I want to tell you about your new go-to secret weapon. It's called Train. Train is a basketball training and education platform that gives you on-demand access to premium basketball courses created by expert coaches and trainers from around the world. Want to get better at blowing by your defender? Learn setup drills with NBA and international pro trainer Marius Williams, or how to use the punch drag with NBA trainer Kerry Darting. Looking to level up your catch and shoot skills? Practice space shooting workouts with former lead female trainer for Kobe Bryant's Mamba League, San Dixon. Or if you're just starting out, learn the basics of shooting and finishing at the basket from international champion, 3-time Romanian Player of the Year, and Train co-founder Vlad Moldoveanu. Train has 32 and counting actionable, expert-led, on-demand basketball training courses that teach you exactly how to improve your ball handling, shooting, attacking, and more. For a limited time, Hoopheads listeners get 35% off monthly, annual, and lifetime plans. Just go to gotrainbasketball.com/hoopheads to learn more and sign up for a free 7-day trial. All right, Chief of Staff, what are you doing day to day?
I get that question more than you would think, and it's a fun story for you. They sent me my job description or like the press release or something when I first took the job and said, hey, could you look all of this over and make sure that it looks good? And they gave a copy to Coach Beard as well. And so I'm just basically fact checking to make sure that they didn't spell my name wrong or,
right.
Like they didn't put, I worked at Southeast Louisiana at any point. Okay. Yeah, it looks fine. But it had like some job description stuff in it. And it was maybe a paragraph long. And I was like, oh, that must be what I'm doing. And Coach gave his version back to the SID, to Wes, and it just had a big X right there. And all it said was one line. It said, we'll be involved in all aspects of the program. And I did not know at the time how true that would be. But I found out pretty quickly. Sorry, that always makes me laugh.
That's funny.
Every single time that
That's
I think
stuff.
about it. But I would do I think Coach figured out pretty quickly that he had hired me to do some things that I was probably not as good at, and he had not hired me to do some things that I was probably better at. So in the morning, I would do a lot of meetings. I would do a lot of organization things. I was very fortunate to have some people like Cooper Anderson, Gino Cicero, Taylor Sinclair, Liz Cope, that all very much were much better at the operations side of things. And I more so oversaw it and made sure that we were ready for an upcoming road trip or, I would meet with social media and they'd tell me the calendar and I'd say, hey, looks great. I don't know what TikTok is, but that sounds good. Whatever you want to do, or whatever it was. I don't even think TikTok existed at the time, but, and I would do a lot of that in the morning. And then, normally Coach would come in around noon and he'd say, what are we doing defensively today? And I would say, I have no idea. And that was the wrong answer. And then I would turn my focus more so to the defensive side. Coach split it up very similar to a football staff where we had offensive and defensive staffs. So Mark Adams headed up the defensive side. I think a lot of people it's very well known. I worked with Coach Adams along with a couple of graduate assistants. And then Coach Berg did a lot of the scouts, almost all the scouts. And then Coach Beard and then Max and Donewald after him worked on the offensive side. So right around noon or 1 o'clock, I would switch my entire focus to defense and scouting and making sure that we were ready to go. And then try and meet with Coach Adams and go through our game plan and exactly what we wanted to get done for that upcoming game. So that was kind of my role in a nutshell. And then it just entailed a whole bunch of different stuff outside of that I would just call other duties as assigned.
So as you're going through all this, and you've obviously had some opportunity, as you've already talked about, to work with some just unbelievable coaches and guys that were willing to pour into you and be a support network for you. How are you kind of cataloging what you're learning along the way? Are you a old school 3-ring binder guy? You Google Drive? Like, how are you keeping track of and thinking about the things that you're learning along the way? What's your process?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Early on, I didn't do a very good job of that, especially at Murray and Emory. And then probably halfway through at Creighton, I started figuring out, all right, I should probably keep a lot of this. I should probably figure out a way to make sure that I don't forget this stuff. So I have about 4 hard drives, and if they ever die, I'm in serious trouble. But I keep a lot of video edits. I keep a lot of PDFs and different documents and, fast draw or just play drawings, things like that. on those documents. And then I keep a lot of notes. And I try to I'm much more meticulous now about making sure, I put, all right, this is triangle and 2 offense. If I see a triangle and 2 again, I'm going to make sure that it's in this folder so that I can reference back to it. Or, sets against, sets with a high level, sets with a big point guard, so that we can take advantage of smaller guards, or sets with a shooting big, things like that, to really try and remember, and to be able to reference whenever it is that I might need them. From a cultural standpoint, Coach Brian Berg that I worked for at Georgia Southern is probably the most organized and elite level person as far as making plans. And we put together some documents, especially when we were leaving Texas Tech, about things that need to be addressed in a program. Whether it's the first year, the second year, building on things. And I think that I'll reference a lot of that stuff for a long time because it was really, really good stuff.
What are some things that, as you move over to Georgia Southern, what are some things that you guys thought were important?
Yeah, I think we were really big on recruiting, and what exactly is your philosophy going to be going into your particular institution? Because I think a lot of people just think it's, well, you just recruit the best players you can get, whatever. But I think we all kind of know that's not true depending on where you're at. Because if you're at Duke, yeah, you take the best high school players you want. And if you're at, Georgia Southern, okay, how do I get the best mix of transfers and different things? And I think what really turned it on its head for us is, one, obviously COVID hits, and we're not able to actually get out and physically be out during the first spring. We have 4 players, and we have no way of actually getting out and talking to people, getting face to face. And then obviously the transfer portal and NIL coming in. Well, now everybody's taking transfers. So you don't get, you go in thinking you're going to take a lot of Georgia bounce back guys that want to come home. And now that philosophy probably has to shift a little bit because of the nature of the beast, because, those kids are going to wherever because everybody wants to take transfers now. So your philosophy has to shift a little bit. So I think that was obviously a big one. I think that, though, it's a lot of the stuff you don't think about, like what's going to be an issue that you're not really aware of. Is it going to be compliance? Is it going to be, we got to Georgia Southern, not to call them out, but they had $25,000 for a gear budget, which may be a lot for some programs. For a Division I program, not so much. Just little things that you don't think of and battles that you don't know you're going to have to fight. What's your academic situation? Can you get everybody in? Are you a school that could take an 80% guy as far as progress towards degree, guy who's been in college for 3-4 years? So all those things are factors that we tried to really write down and really just understand and have a sense of going in and ask the right questions. And I think that's something that I'll try and carry on through each job as I figure out more and more what I should be asking, and what's important. Because some of those things aren't important and it doesn't matter. But some of those things are going to be, the thorn in your side, or they're going to be a huge help to you going forward.
Getting to know your institution, right, is a big part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah, because if you don't know exactly what you're getting into, which, again, clearly there are some things that you can't know when you're going into a new place as a completely new staff. There are just things that no matter how much you prepare, you're just not going to see coming, and then you got to adjust on the fly. But I think your process, like you're talking about, which is thinking that through and talking it through and really trying to consider what are some things that we have to look at before we get there. Just the thought exercise of going through that, I'm sure, would be and is tremendously valuable as you go into a new job. So for you at Georgia Southern, you're finally getting an opportunity to get out on the court and coach. What did that feel like, and how much did you enjoy that part of it?
Oh, it was everything that I wanted, everything that I wanted, and I got it. I was very thankful because, Coach Berg didn't put any reins on me. He didn't, say, hey, you haven't been on the floor in a long time. Let's ease back into this. Let's just have you do this or that. He, really gave me a lot of responsibility, and in year 3, allowing me to run the defense and have my own practice plans and execute the game plans and do all those things was where I probably found the most joy in coaching, because like we talked about, being able to really affect the performance, implement what I'm seeing on film, and really just kind of put it together was really, it was awesome. It was awesome. I don't know any other way to put it. It's I love being out on the floor with those dudes and kind of being in their ear and helping them get better, and them seeing themselves get better, both on film and through their performance and stats and our wins. And it was awesome. It was awesome.
Working with a head coach, and you've obviously worked with a number of them and seen the way that they handle different things. But one of the things that I think that whenever I talk to an assistant coach or somebody who's been in both roles, I think one of the things that's most important is that head coach providing leadership to the staff in terms of the expectations of what that assistant coach needs to do. And then to go beyond that, empowering that assistant coach to have some things that they're in charge of, that the head coach is able to delegate to those assistant coaches so that they can feel like they're taking that over. And it sounds like that's what happened with you, where you really get an opportunity to be able to grow under a head coach who gives you that responsibility. That's not always easy to do, right? Especially when you're new in a place, and anybody who's a coach, we kind of have that control freak type part of us where I want to have my hand in everything. And I think sometimes, especially for younger coaches, it's sometimes difficult to be able to step back and do that delegating. But it sounds like in all the places that you've been, that you've obviously been under some experienced guys, but just the fact that you were able to be empowered by, hey, here's what we need you to do, and then we're going to kind of let you do it and guide you along the way to help you improve and get better. So I'm sure that that's something that you've appreciated at all your different stops.
Without a doubt. And you said it much more eloquently than I ever could, but that's spot on. And I think it takes, like you said, it takes a lot for a head coach to really let pieces of that go and say, do your job and execute it. This is what, I've hired you to do. But at the same time, we all know the ones that micromanage everything and want a hand in everything. And that's their prerogative. I wouldn't take that away from anyone either, because it's their name on the front of the front of the deal. But it's big for the development of myself and everybody that I've worked around because of those people empowering us.
What's the most important thing you've learned, or you did learn, in your couple of years at Georgia Southern?
That's a good question. And I've thought through a decent amount of it. I really do. I think taking the right guys in year one and really making sure that you have the right base under you. And that's not a slight to any of our guys. I think we had some really, really good people and some good pieces. I think that your first class, because of how little time this profession, how impatient this profession has become, if you have setbacks in year one, that affects you in year 2 and year 3. And it takes time. Even in the transfer portal world, very few places replace 13 every single year. I say very few.
More common than it used to be. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I was going to say I didn't say none, because I do know a couple people, including Coach Brom, his first year at Murray. But you've got to make sure that you take the right guys, and you've got to build your culture out the right way, because your guys that are there previously, that's the standard. And regardless of what you say your standards are, it's whatever you allow. And those guys that have been there for the year, that first year, are the ones that are going to tell the other guys and show the other guys what the standard is through their actions and what you allow them to both get away with and what you allow them to do.
So what does that look like for you now at Western Kentucky, being involved in the recruiting process and the kind of players that you're looking for from, let's take it, obviously there's a level of play, skill, talent that somebody has to be able to have to play Division I basketball at Western Kentucky. But clearly, as you said earlier, you're not just looking for a guy who has a skill set. There's another piece of it that you want guys who are going to fit in, that are going to be part of what you're trying to do. So for you, as a new assistant coach, obviously you have some familiarity with the staff, and what they want and what they're looking for, but just the learning process for you. And then what are some of the things that you're looking for in players from an intangible standpoint?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. They have to have a requisite amount of talent. But I think the biggest thing for assistants is figuring out what it is that your head coach wants. And I think Coach Lutz, to his credit, has turned down some good players because he didn't think that they would fit either being coached by him or just from a standpoint of what we're trying to build from a culture standpoint. And again, that doesn't mean I'm not saying anything was any different in any other places. I just think that he's been even more probably stringent on who he will and won't take because of those facts. And I think that what it's led to is a group that we have right now in the roster that he's put together with the rest of the staff has been a really high quality person. Even if they're not the 5-star guy, they have really been, each one of these guys wants to win. Each one of these guys has high character, and I think they all want to work. And I think that's worth its weight in gold. Because if you have guys that aren't one of those things, doesn't want to work, or they don't have great character, or, they don't have the requisite level of talent or whatever, then you run into issues. And I'm not saying these guys are going to be perfect, but I do think Coach has taken some non-negotiables and put them on the table as far as we're not going to recruit dudes that I don't want to coach and I don't want at my house on a day-to-day basis.
It's obviously an inexact science, right? That if you could just wave that magic wand and figure all that out, everything would work out great. So how do you, when you're evaluating players in your mind, when you go out and watch a kid, whether it's on film, in person, when you're shaking their hand, when you're meeting their family, what are some things, some signs that you look for to tell you, hey, this is the kind of kid that Coach Lutz is going to want to have around? And as you said, have him over to his house and all those things. How do you evaluate that? Because clearly the basketball skill is much more obvious to see. I mean, you still have to have an eye for what the talent level is and all those kinds of things in terms of being able to evaluate. But the intangible part of it is a little bit harder. So for you personally, as you're recruiting, you're talking to a kid or you're looking at a kid, what are some of the things that you think are telltale signs of the type of kid that you want to recruit?
Yeah, I don't think that there is one thing that I just look at, but there's a sum of the parts that can give you a pretty big picture. And I'll say this: I think one of the biggest impediments of just recruiting guys from video is not getting to see how they react in a huddle when they're getting coached, how they react when their teammate misses them. Right? When their teammate goes in and takes maybe a questionable shot, or they should have kicked it, how do they react to that? How do they talk to their teammates? When you're in home, how do they talk to their parents? How do they interact with their parents? I think that there are a lot of things that you can draw from that. And that's not the end all be all, but I do think if those red flags go up of always having a response when they're getting coached. Well, he didn't do this and blaming, or when a teammate talks to him and they shrug him off, or they don't want to get excited about teammate success and team success. I think all those things are red flags. Now there's also a level of competitiveness that I think you can see that are really, some of those green flags more so than red flags. where guys are picking other guys up, or, they're recognizing situations. Hey, we got to get a stop here. And they're encouraging teammates and they're lifting those guys up, understanding the situation. And a lot of these things, again, you have to kind of see in person because they're harder to see on film. And then really digging into people's backgrounds. That's doing our homework as assistants, is like, if we're recruiting these kids, and that's part of what gets lost in the portal, is you're recruiting these kids for 2 weeks. Are you going to find the people who are going to tell you the truth? Like, everybody on the first call is going to say, he's a great kid,
Yep.
such and such. I think he'd be a great player for your league, blah, 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 whatever. Who's the person that's going to tell you, yeah, he's a jerk sometimes, or man, he really hates schoolwork. Like, he's just not going to do it. Things like that.
All right, let me ask you this question. Let's start with the positive side of this. Biggest positive in your mind to come out of the transfer portal and then NIL? What are the positives of that from your perspective?
I think the ability for players to maybe right a mistake. I think, and part of this is on coaches, is like, we sell this grandiose version of everything. It's honeymoon all recruiting process long. Everything's awesome. Everything is the greatest thing ever. You're going to be the man, all these different things. And sometimes when kids get there and it's not what they were told, I don't blame them.
Yeah.
Like, I know some of the things that colleagues have said to kids that are just simply not true. Like, you're telling them that they're going to play 30 minutes a night. They played 12. Okay, there's a big difference between 30 and 12. So I get that. I think NIL, at least the way that it was intended to come about, and I'm not going to speak to how it's actually being used, is a very pure thing. I'll give you a quick example. I was at Murray State with Ed Daniel, and Ed Daniel had a giant afro. He was like 6'6", dunked everything, made really big-time highlight plays and was an unselfish player. And they made these T-shirts with Mr. Ed, the horse, with an afro on it. And it said, Mr. Ed is my hero, or something like that. And it was an awesome shirt. And I always thought, like, man, Ed should get a couple dollars out of that. Like, he should get something out of that, because that's really cool and people are excited and we're on this big win streak. Like, he should be able to get a couple dollars off that. So I think that in that form is a really good thing. And putting a little bit more money in guys' pockets is, especially, when most of these guys are not going to have long, illustrious NBA careers. We know the statistics on how many are actually going to make it. I don't blame a lot of these guys for taking, for getting what they're getting and really trying to stretch that money. And for a 4-year deal, this is why wouldn't you? So I think those things are not negatives. I think those are positives to come out.
Yeah,
of
those
this.
are two things that I think are the intent of them. I think is very player centric and very pro player. And I think you make a great point about the portal. I think one of the things that, people always thought is, right, it's here a coach can recruit a kid and then boom, they can leave and go take a bigger, better job and get a big payday. And now kids are left with, okay, if I want to transfer, I got to sit a year. So I think that trying to level the playing field is something that was the intent of the rule. And I think it's probably done that. And on the NIL side of it, I agree with you completely. I think the opportunity for kids to be able to capitalize on whatever popularity they have, depending on the level of the school where they are and who wants to get involved with them, I think that's nothing but positive. And yet at the same time, I'm sure there are challenges. So I'm not going to use the word negatives, but just in your experience to this point, what are some of what is one of the challenges? You can either take the portal, NIL, or both, but just something that as a staff, you yourself have seen being a challenge and trying to implement it and get it to work the way it's supposed to.
Yeah. I think that the biggest challenge for the portal is that you have a difficult time really building on success, because you're constantly worried about, who can leave at the end of the year, and how many scholarships are we actually going to have? How many of these guys are actually going to stay? If they have success, are they going to leave? If they don't have success and they don't play, are they going to leave? So there's so much indecision surrounding that, that's certainly a frustrating or challenging aspect of it, because you want to pour into these guys. And I think we still will, because we feel like that's the right thing to do. But I know programs, in the country that aren't. They're like, man, am I going to give this dude everything that I got and then he leaves at the end of the year? That's a very real thing that I'm hearing, on the recruiting trail and things like that. That's discouraging, because I do think you should pour into these guys 100%.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, when you think about, again, let's take your level at Western Kentucky, right? A kid comes in, and how have you succeeded in the past at a mid-major school? You find kids who are under the radar, you develop them, they become 4-year players. By the time they're juniors or seniors, those guys are the guys that help you to win. And I think now it's more difficult, right? A kid comes in, has a really good freshman season. Now schools that are maybe a little bit bigger or one tier above look at it and say, well, here's a kid who's already proven himself as a college basketball player, as a student. He's in the portal. It's just that to me, when I think it, because I played at Kent State, and I always kind of think of, so I'm always looking at it kind of from that mid-major perspective of, you get a kid who's really, who excels, that would be a kid that in years past might have been a 4-year kid. Now all of a sudden there's some schools that are maybe one level higher that are interested in him. And to me, like as you said, when you don't know at the end of the year, it's like you're trying to thread a needle of, hey, we want the guy to be really good, but man, not that good. And we want a guy at the end of the bench. We want to keep him happy enough that he'll come back, because those are guys that, as freshmen and sophomores, you're building them into eventually being upperclassmen and being a part of it. But if they're unhappy, then, who knows? Are they going to leave? And so I can only imagine the challenges of trying to figure all that out.
Yeah, it's certainly a new element that a lot of people didn't sign up for in this business. That's just making all of our lives a little bit tougher.
No question. All right, what are you most excited about Western Kentucky?
I think I'm really excited to get back to a place that is just basketball. I mean, this place through and through is just hoops. The fans, I gave this example the other day. I was at the barbershop trying to get my hair cut, and I'm trying to find the right barber. And the guy starts talking to me, and I said, yeah, I'm a new assistant basketball coach at Western. He said, well, let me tell you something. And I was like, okay, well, lay it on me. And he said, I don't understand why we can't shoot free throws. And all of a sudden, he was into a 10 to 15 minute lecture with, mind you, physical animations of how he felt like we should shoot free throws. And while that can be seen as obviously a negative, I think it just speaks to how much this community loves hoops, and how invested they are in our program. And this place has had so much success. A Final Four, 7 Sweet 16s, 43, I believe, All-Americans, 46 NBA draft picks. Like, to walk into a place like this and have an opportunity to coach here is just a blessing. And I think, like I said, getting back to a place that just loves hoops is really exciting. And that's not a knock on anywhere else. I just think this place is special.
All right. So 2-part question to wrap things up. Part 1, when you look ahead over the next year or two, what do you see as being your biggest professional challenge? And then part 2, when you think about what you get to do every single day, and I'm going back to the beginning of our conversation, there you are on the Air Force Base, and all of a sudden, boom, you're getting an opportunity to coach basketball. And now you think about where you are today. What brings you the most joy about what you get to do every single day? So your biggest challenge and then your biggest joy.
Yeah, that's That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge for me, and I haven't expressed this a ton throughout our conversation here, but the biggest challenge for me is that I want to balance being a really good father. And I've got 2 young kids at 5 and 2, and I see a profession that, like we just talked about, has become kind of nonstop, trying to figure out if you've got a roster, or do you not have a roster, or, is the guy going in the portal or not going in the portal? Is he going to graduate? Oh my gosh, now he can leave at any point. And then getting to the season, and obviously you're go during the season and trying to win games. But balancing that with, being a good father, being at home, being present, because I think there's so much value in that. And I think that my kids need to see a really good role model. And I think that challenge is just growing because of the way our business is moving. Now, from a joy standpoint, I couldn't imagine or have drawn up, and this is only a God thing in my opinion, to where I've been able to go, where I've been able to coach, and the people that I've been able to do it with. And I truly am blessed. And I know a lot of people use that, a little bit liberally with saying blessed, but I really am, just with the opportunities that I've been given. And I think sometimes when I look back, like I have no idea how some of this stuff came to be. And it could only be God, because I don't know how those connections formed and things like that. And so that's awesome. And I cannot wait. Like I still get up in the morning. I got up this morning, we had a 10 a.m. workout, and I was just really excited to go and help get these guys better and to be on the floor with them and to, chop it up. And, I like coming and kind of hitting guys before practice. And, I don't know anywhere else in the country, and I'll kind of close it on this, where you would go into work at about 8:30 in the morning, and the first thing that you would do is to kind of jump up, and you know how you kind of jump into people and just kind of get excited.
Yep.
I do that 6 times every morning when I walk into the gym. And I think that'd probably be frowned upon at JP Morgan.
Set a new standard, man. Set a new culture. Maybe they could use a little of that.
They might. But I really am. I'm excited every time I get to step on the floor, because I know, and I've done some of the other things that you could do to make a living in this world. And so truly blessed and just really excited to continue to do that.
Yeah, that's well said, Tim. I think when you talk about being a great dad and being there for your kids, there's obviously nothing better than that. And then I think the second piece of it, when you get to do something where every morning you look forward to it and you're looking forward to chest bumping and jumping up and slamming bodies with guys, man, there's nothing better when that's your attitude when you get up out of bed in the morning. Then you've really hit on something and you know that you're in the right place. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to share. How can people reach out, get in touch with you, whether you want to share social media, website, email, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then after you do that, I'll jump back in and wrap things up.
Yeah, no, anybody is welcome to reach out to me. The 2 probably primary ways that I communicate outside of my phone, outside of my cell number, are email, and it's just tim.McAllister. You have to spell my name correctly. It's MacAllister at wku.edu. So it's just my first name dot last name at wku.edu. And then on Twitter, I'm at basketballmac, Mac being MAC. So certainly anybody's welcome to reach out. I'm happy to get back to you as soon as I can. If I don't get back to you soon, don't be afraid to follow up. If it starts with, I've got a 5'9" power forward for you, I may not get back to you near as quickly.
There you go. Completely understood. All right, Tim, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule tonight to jump on and join us. Really appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks. Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.